Okay, so the third and fourth one, I'm not going to say a bunch. I'm just going to keep doing the same routine over and over, and you can try it on your own, or you can just follow it as we go, just in case you want to see if you're catching on to it yourself, or if you want to follow it a few more times, okay? So the graph is going to look like this. Parentheses 2x minus 1 divided by parentheses x plus 2. Okay, so here's our curves. So to find the exact asymptotes, if I want the vertical, I'm going to look horizontal, so that equals 0. So I subtract 2 from both sides, and x is -2. So, alright, so this line that we're talking about is at -2. The other one, since I want horizontal, I'm going to divide vertically. So that's 2x divided by x. 2 over 1 is just a 2. Okay, the x's will cancel. So 2 over 1 is just a 2. So it's also 2. So that's this dotted line. So that's where it's not crossing like right here. So the curves are top left and bottom right. Okay, because that's what the graph is showing us. So now, as it goes off to the left, it's approaching this 2. As it goes off to the right, it's also approaching that dotted line, which is 2. Remember, that's the horizontal asymptote. And then just ask yourself, these are both increasing. This one's going up, that one's going up. So there's no decreasing. So this interval is from -infinity to -2. Because it approaches -2, but it doesn't cross it. And this interval starts at -2, and it goes off to infinity. And remember, that just means that this is our vertical asymptote. Okay? So, two sections that are both going up, but they break apart because of that -2. So there's the left one and there's the right one. Okay, so let's look at the other one. Kind of freaked me out a little bit because I was thinking this was on the graph, and even me, it was a little weird. Okay, because of the marker and calculator. But let me graph this next one. Parentheses -4 divided by x plus 1. So, again, we're going to have a curve that's similar, but let's find those exact numbers. So, the denominator, to find the vertical asymptote, we're going to look horizontally. That equals 0, so when I take away 1 on both sides, x is -1. So, get out of the way. Okay, so it can't cross at -1. So that is what that line is. And that's because, guys, you don't want a 0 in the denominator, because you can't divide by 0, so it's impossible. So that's why we don't ever cross it, because it's impossible to ever get a -1 down there. Okay? And then to do the horizontal asymptote, just wanted to make sure I was talking about the right one. Okay, we want to divide vertically, but if you notice, there's no x. There's no x right there. So since there's no x, it's like saying 0 divided by x, because there's no x up there. So 0 divided by anything is really just 0. So once again, we have the x-axis. So right here, they're approaching the x-axis, but they're not going to cross it, okay? So if you cannot divide, if you don't have an x on top and an x on bottom, then it's always 0 because you can't do it. It's just 0 divided by whatever. Okay, so now, as we go off to negative infinity, oh, the curves, sorry. Top left, bottom right, okay? As we go off to negative infinity, it's approaching that brown line, which is the horizontal asymptote, so it's 0. As we go off to positive infinity, as it goes off to the right, it's approaching that brown line again, which is 0. So remember, that's the horizontal asymptote. And then both of those are going up, so there's no decreasing. And the breaking point is at negative 1. So one interval is from the left to negative 1, and the other interval is from negative 1 off to the right forever. So the breakup is negative 1. From the left to the right, they're in union. And remember, that relates directly to our vertical asymptote. Okay, so I've said it a bunch. Hopefully you're catching on to the routine. So now the next page changes up the shapes a little bit, but it's the same idea. We still do the same thing to the denominator. We still divide the numerators. So we're still going to get those same asymptotes, okay? All right. So let's look at the back page. Okay, so in order to get this graph, let's look at it. Now, we want to be careful with it because there are already parentheses in the denominator. We have to put an extra set. Okay, so there's going to be a bunch of parentheses in the denominator. Y equals parentheses x squared. Oop. For some reason the parentheses didn't work. X squared divided by 2 sets of parentheses, because one is x minus 4 and the other one is x plus 2, and then close them off because that's the entire denominator. So here is our curve, and actually the curves look like this. It curves like this curves like this, and this one curves like that, okay? So those real steep lines, those are those asymptotes that we need to look for, okay? Plus we need to look for the reason why they're curving away from each other is because there's also a vertical asymptote that we need to, horizontal asymptote that we need to find out the exact, where it is exactly, okay? So to do the vertical, remember, look horizontally. So let's look at the denominator horizontally. And what we want to do is we want to actually look at each of them, because each of them could be 0. Okay, it's kind of like finding solutions or finding zeros like we did a couple units ago. Okay, each of them could be 0, because that would make the denominator 0, and then they can't cross. So if that is 0, then that means that x is 4. And if this is 0 and I solved it, that means that x is negative 2. So those are the two vertical lines that we see, negative 2 and positive 4. Okay, so that is what these lines are. This one is negative 2 and that one is positive 4. Okay? Now, to do the horizontal asymptote, we just have to be careful when we divide. Okay? There's 2 x's if you notice here. So if you got an x squared on top, and you divide it by both of those x's, which x times x is x squared, okay, you can actually divide that. X squared divided by x squared, the x squareds cancel out, and that's just 1 divided by 1, so y is 1. So that actually means that the line that this isn't crossing is 1. So the dotted line is like up here. I got a little sloppy with it, but that's pretty much where that is. So then we have our curves. Our curves are top left, top right, and then a U going the other direction, okay? So there's more to it because there was more to the denominator. It's because it went up to x squared instead of just x, so there's a little bit more to it. So now, as we go off to the left, it's still the same idea. As this goes off to the left, it's still approaching that horizontal asymptote. So it is still 1, okay? Because this is still coming close to that dotted line where y is 1, okay? So as it goes off to the right, it's still going to be the same thing. This curve is going to come super close to that y equals 1. So that's still the horizontal asymptote. That hasn't changed. Okay? Now this is a tiny bit different. Let's see. Maybe I need to be a little bit more exact on this curve. Okay? There is a place where we need to... Hopefully we won't have to do increase and decrease. I'll look at it a little bit in more detail before we talk about it in class, because this does increase and decrease. But I'm not exactly sure where that turning point is, and I can't see it on this graph either. So I'll look into how to get the detail of that in a second. I mean, before we practice it in class. But let's at least do, this is increasing and that one's decreasing. So let's at least look at these two for our increase and our decrease, okay? And actually, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It probably, when it comes to the 1, 2, 3, 4, it's probably like at 1 because that's the center of those. Okay, so the turning point is probably around here. That's the center of, it's 3 to the left and 3 to the right. So I would bet that that's our turning point. And I'll go through and I'll make sure to show you exactly why when we talk about it more in class. So this is increasing and that's increasing. So the two things that are increasing are from negative infinity, and it breaks at -2. Okay, which is one of our asymptotes, remember. And then this is also increasing because it's going up from left to right. So it's going from -2, it looks like, to +1, if that's the correct turning point, and I'll double check that. Okay, so that -2, remember, is that vertical asymptote. Keep almost saying horizontal. And then these two are decreasing. This is going down and that's going down. So from 1 to the breaking point, which is 4, in union with 4 off to infinity. So this is starting, it's starting close to 4 and it goes off to infinity. These two are going down, okay? And then if you notice, we still are talking about our vertical asymptotes right here. Okay, 2 and 4. Excuse me, -2 and 4. So these two vertical asymptotes that we got, they are still relating to the intervals. The only thing we need to double check is this turning point, which again, I'll look into to help clarify that, okay? All right, so that is what we're going to do. What we'll do is we'll do 6, 7, and 8 like together in class, just to get us practicing a little bit more, and then we'll go from there. Well, I'll see how long this is, and then we'll go from there, okay?